And so I was like, so I went online and all these TVs are like smart TVs for our, and I don't want all that shit in my house. I'm like, I just need a stupid TV. I need a dumb TV. So I found one on Craigslist, and the lady was like, I need this stuff. I need this to go, blah, 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 blah. She's like, I've got this 36-inch TV or something like that. She's like, $40.
Yeah.
Like, that's why I was like, hey, bro, can I see? Can we
you snatched it up before it's gone. I mean, you don't know what you got till it's gone. No, I understand. No, we had a question of time, so it's all good. All right, so good luck with those games, man. I remember those. The one I was asking you about was BioJack, though, because I think it was called BioJack, but it was like one of those Double Dragon fighting games. Yeah, we're on. It was one of those Double Dragon fighting game type games, right? But like in those games, you have a long health bar, and you're supposed to like fight like 30, 50 people or something like that to get to the level, and they have small health bars. But BioJack, like you had the same. It was like real life. Like imagine you're one man trying to fight 50 men to get to the end, and like it was like an impossible game. You had to learn legit combat like skill.
There was one of them that I always loved that is on here that actually I believe it. I thought it was originally an NES game, and maybe they made a version for the SNES. But do you remember POW?
I don't remember POW.
POW, same thing. It's a side-scrolling fighting game, but it was like one of those ones where you had to like stick and run. Hit the boss and run back, and then dodge for 5 minutes, then run back up and hit him one more time. One of those like 15-minute epic boss battles at the end of every round. It's just ridiculous.
All right, so we're joined live this hour by Seth Walker, who is a poet, an author, touring artist, many different things. I mean, Seth's worn many hats, so we're really excited to have you on for this hour. So Seth, can you tell us a little bit before we get started with some of the things you're kind of known for around the country? Can we start with how you got started? Like, so how did you start writing poetry? How did you come to the scene? Where was this? Time, place, like let us know.
I actually people ask me, they're like, well, what got you into writing poetry? And I said, survival. So actually when I was a kid, my parents got me a journal for Christmas one year, and they encouraged me to start journaling in it. And I'd write I'd write a little something every few weeks. And then like 6 months later, I went back and I started looking through them, and I was like, I forgot about this stuff totally. So I really love journaling. And so all of a sudden I was writing 2 or 3 journal entries a day and just really filling this book out. Well, one day I came in, I was called inside, and I come inside and I'm sitting, and I sat down in the living room with my father and my mother, and my journal is on the coffee table. And I'm like, oh shit. So they then make me open that journal and read every single page out loud. And I had to tear out every page that wasn't Christ-like, that wasn't being a good Christian. Because my dad was a preacher. A lot of people don't know that, is I'm a preacher's son. And had to tear up every page that wasn't Christ-like and flush it down the toilet.
Wow.
And so after that, then my parents handed me back the journal, and they're like, all right, keep writing. No, we won't do this again. You have your privacy. And I was like, so it destroyed my level of trust. I understood that anything that I recorded, someone will probably have access to at some point. There's no such thing as privacy. And so I started writing in a way that I would remember what was going on, but other people wouldn't necessarily. And so years later, I found out that there I was, 8, 9 years old, writing in veiled, using metaphor and allegory to veil my true story, because I understood that my story was not safe to be shared.
Yeah.
Years later, I went through Hurricane Katrina, and I was actually going to a therapist where I got diagnosed with PTSD, and I was writing poetry, just kind of processing it. And they said, you need to go read this, and like desensitization therapy. So I went out and I started reading my poetry as a therapy assignment.
Wow.
And people were like, wow, your stuff is really good. And then I moved to Houston, and then I heard about this poetry slam thing. And first time I slammed, I didn't make it into the second round, bro.
Yeah.
I didn't make it into the second round. But then after that, I got first. I got first place, and then I hit this winning streak, and I won every poetry competition in Houston for like 8 months solid out of nowhere. And then at that point, I just started touring, and kind of the rest was history after that.
Yeah. So let's get you know, a lot of what we're doing here is trying to like preserve the history of you know, these oral histories of venues and presses and just different things like that. So tell us, you know, before you moved to Houston, where were you based out of, and what venues were you attending?
Oh God, I was in Jackson, Mississippi, and the place is still active, but now it has a different name, and I can't for the life of me, I can't remember the name of the place now. But it was in East Jackson, and it was right around in between Bellhaven and Millsaps, I think. There was this little poetry spot. I mean, and it was me and my buddy who went. We were the only white people that would even go to that area. Like, people, you know, would always tell us, like, you shouldn't even go over to that area. It's super dangerous, blah, 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 blah. And we're like, I don't know if we were just not racist, or if we were just young, naive, and stupid, that we didn't know, like, hey, these are different. It was one of those areas that had a really bad rep, but it was this amazing place. When I got to Houston, one of the most impressive venues that existed in Houston ever was Mr. A's. And it was off of Cavalcade in the 5th Ward of Houston. And the 5th Ward of Houston, especially right around Cavalcade, this place, Mr. A's, this club, on every other night had a fucking gun check. Like, straight up. They're like, you're not allowed to bring your gun into the club. That was like a house rule. That's the kind of area that's like, cops didn't go here. This shit was really dangerous. But on Tuesday nights, the club transformed, and it was this poetry venue that was run by a guy named Black Snow, who to this day is one of the most phenomenal art businessmen that I've ever met in my life. And from that one spot, we ended up, Snow got together a collection of different artists, and we made Snow Industries. And that was where it was like 5 to 7 of us got together, and we started opening up venues in different areas of town. So we had one that was like kind of a nice, like, jazz poetry kind of place. And then Mr. A's was like, our place was poetry in the hood. And 97.9 The Box. It was hands down one of the realest art scenes I've ever seen. I went in and I cut my teeth, and it was amazing because you either killed it tonight or you didn't.
Yeah.
The beginning, and that's the end of that story. You did well on the mic or you didn't. And it's just like a comedy club. You know what I'm saying? Like, some nights you go in there and you're 5 minutes, you slay. And sometimes you go in there and that same set, 5 minutes, and it's just crickets.
Yeah.
But you're at the bar afterwards, and everybody looks at you and they're like, wow, you did good, or that was embarrassing.
Yeah.
You know, and it was, I'd say out of all the places that I got to witness as far as scenes coming up, that was an amazing thing in Houston, was watching Snow Industries expand into all the venues that they did. And they really brought, because Snow didn't do slam. That was another really important thing, is that Snow didn't give a shit about slam. We understood that the only point to slam was that if there's a competition, there's a declared winner. And if there's a declared winner, that is something that you can build a resume with.
Mhm.
So the only point to ever having a competition is that someone builds their resume at the end of the day. Where if you go up there and you're like, yeah, I kill it at the open mic. Applause at my local open mic.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like that doesn't matter.
Right.
So that was one of the coolest things that I got to see there was just it fostered so many amazing Houston artists, but more than anything, Houston is a scene unto itself. If I hear a poet start spitting and they're from Houston, I can tell you 3-4 lines in. I'm like, this motherfucker's from Houston.
Yeah.
The only people that would throw me off are from Dallas, but you know that like Houston and Dallas poets, they don't sound like anybody else, and they sound very much like themselves.
Yeah. So I mean, I know that, but I can't imitate it. So tell me, what is a? I mean, I can do what I can do. What I can do is kind of the Central Valley. I mean, I can do Central Valley kind of thing, which is like it sounds like this, right? It sounds like Johnny he shot Jojo by the river. Jojo bled into the streets. Sometimes you don't have a choice. So it's like just horrific things happening in a very deadpan. That's the Central Valley, right? And that I know how that kind of how they do that. And then there's kind of East LA thing. I know kind of how that sounds. I know how LA kind of. But what are like some 3 lines for like that's a Houston poem? Oh man, you froze.
Hmm.
So what are 3 lines from Houston?
Yeah, so one thing that like as soon as I say this, you're gonna be like, oh my god, that is Texas poets. Is the poets who they do nothing but bullet poses. So when they are on stage, they can't move. They lock and lock while they yell. It's so funny to me, but like, and like, I mean, like, oh god, like, I'm not even gonna bring up the names of some of the poets who are just notorious for it, but like, back in the day, there was one. I mean, it was like there was a poet who did this like very, very loud, screaming bullet point poem about a baby being killed. And he got known as the dead baby poet. But he's like all of his poems were like these horrible, tragic stories, and he's like screaming 3 words at a time, and it's like the problem is that there are some delivery strategies that will evoke enough emotions and stir people up enough that they will get significantly higher points.
Yeah.
Well, statistically, they're going to do better because of the very, that delivery method,
all over the country, though. I mean, like people might get used to it at a certain place in time.
Yeah.
Work on the national.
Another thing that I noticed in Texas is there was in Texas, you have this whole thing where, and there are a few other places where poetry and the hip hop scene are really, really interlaced.
Yeah,
Texas is definitely one of those, and so you have a lot of like Texas is the only place I ever heard people do battle poems.
Mm-hmm.
And this blows my mind, okay? Because you know how there's like battle rap and it's 2 battle rappers and they're ad-libbing and they're talking trash, right? So an insult for 3 minutes. So, they get up there and say some shit like, my pin is so hot it could melt the sun. Your pin is so cold you already done, son.
Yeah.
Off my stage. I'm gonna eat you with rage. Turn page. Like, and you're like, fuck is this?
Yeah.
It's really awesome to watch when you're drinking if you can get into it though. And that's the thing is you sit there and it's like listening to someone talk trash, but the subject is this aloof individual or segmented figure. So everyone gets to laugh about this person being dogged, but the person being dogged doesn't exist. So it does it makes a common enemy. So it makes for a really good kind of rebel rousing, fun, kind of moment. But it is definitely, I've never been never once when I was at the Boston Cantab did I hear someone go up and write and read a battle poem. Like that's
it's unique. All right, so okay, so you win all these slams in Houston. You compete in some of the national, not the national, but the Texas statewide kind of thing, and then you build up that resume and you decide to take it on tour. So tell us about your travels. So tell us about kind of moving around the country and some of your early travels. I want to ask you about the mountain, but don't jump into before the mountain, but pre-mountain travels.
No, I mean the thing is the mountain is really it's a separate thing from everything else. I mean, because it was that was more of kind of what set on my spiritual journey and what first kind of made me, let's say, open up to the mystery a little bit more. What got me into occult studies and things like that later in life. But when I was touring at first, I learned how to play the game. I learned how to play chess. And the thing is that I learned how to play it as ethically as I could. So I understood that I could write these kinds of poems to make these kinds of chess pieces that I could play during these specific moments to get a higher score than you. But what I really challenged myself to try to make good art. And I think that was the difference between me and a lot of other people who were running around winning slams at that time. Poets, who ever was or will be. If Alvin Lau shows up and he wants to take your cookies, he'll take your fucking cookies. Now, he may literally 100% of the stories he tells on stage may be fictional. He may tell you that he taught a class of kids who came out of the closet and were all rejected by their parents and committed suicide. He may tell you some crazy, extravagant, heart-wrenching story, and at the end of it is a lie.
Yeah.
But he is an amazing story writer and storyteller. And so there were some of those lines that I never felt comfortable ethically crossing, but now I'm 35 and I look back and I'm like, it's people are making a paycheck as full-time artists. Yeah, they're going to lie on stage. I should have pulled my head out of my ass. But my thing was I would study ahead of me. So when I was in Arizona, I'm online watching videos of you, Dave Perez, of Kat Miguel, Shihan. I'm watching poets who are out there who are being successful. And then I say, okay, what elements do they share? Because that's then the Cali style, SoCal style. And I say, okay, so I need to have something that meshes with that style, but stands out enough that people are like, what is this? But if I bring them something that's completely foreign, it may be unpalatable.
You started directing air traffic in the Dallas style.
So New York, New York and Chicago, people got a hand in their pocket. So when they're doing the poetry, they're like, yeah, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't know why, but they also specifically
they're wrestling with an imaginary toothpick in their mouth, they're moving a toothpick around, but it's not there. Well, yeah. It's a phantom toothpick.
Yeah, I mean, there's another thing of it's really cool in certain places to look like you don't want to be there, and so people get up on stage and they're like, there's a tree growing out of my grandmother's grave. It's beautiful in the spring. The clouds are flowing. And you're like, if you don't want to read this, stop.
You You know, the most bizarre thing is kind of like looking at the academic journals, not necessarily academic, but the more the quote unquote trade journals of like what are the more like literature, the literati, I don't know what it's called. The trends that they go through. Because I mean, I always know about spoken word trends, like, when your mother calls you for the seventh time, telling you that this is the final time, do not hang up, do not walk away, carry your flowers through your heart, blah blah blah. Right? It's like this kind of like weird
Formula.
instruction. Yeah, huh?
Formulas. That's so.
Yeah,
What that we do up here is in the mountains in Netherlands every summer we teach a poetry class.
He froze.
Manipulation of slam and slam formula.
Yeah.
So when you go into a slam, whether you like it or not, those judges are judging you long before you hit that stage. And if you're being an asshole piece of shit, and if you had a positive experience with a judge,
we froze there for a second. You said if you're being an asshole piece of shit, what'd you say after that?
If you're being an asshole piece of shit and you have an interaction with a judge or a judge observes you before they're even picked as a judge.
Yeah.
When you get on stage, they're going to tank your score no matter how good your poem is. And the opposite is also true. So one of the tricks that I used to tell people is before a slam, go outside in the parking lot and start a cipher and then hog it. I shit you not. It works. Why? Because most of the people who might be picked to be a judge will probably see you in that circle. And so what you do is it's instead of going in and spitting like 3 and 4 minute poems, have a bunch of 30 and 45-second poems. So jump in, drop 30 seconds, jump out, let someone else jump in. Let somebody else jump in, do 30 seconds, jump out. I can let 2 people go in between me who are doing 3 and 4 minute poems and do a 30-second poem in between them and not be an asshole and not get called out for it.
That's clever. Yeah. But like what I was saying is about there's these formulas obviously in slam, but there's formulas everywhere. So I remember reading this poem that was like in this poetic journal, and it was they all have this weird thing now where they like describe like early spring, I cut the lemons on the board. The smell of citrus, the breeze of the afternoon. My brother Tim had been dead now 3 years. There's like the no setup, no whatever, just this jarring last line that's like an emotional gut punch set up by something that's totally not whatever. And the contrast of that is supposed to be the thing that's like, oh my God, what genius, right? But it's like it's such a, I don't know, there's just always like little tricks and whatever. And it's like I get the first person to ever come up with doing it is like, oh, how brilliant, right? The first time. Everyone starts copying.
Like, and the whole joke, like 5 or 6 years ago, we started, like, people in the Northeast started making the joke about no more rib cage. And Mark Palos and I want to say Sam Tidal and Ryan McClellan, I believe, went on the No More Ribcage tour. And Bo Williams, that was the other person, Bo Williams. They started going around. They're like, look, guys, like we have started. Money. And so we were teaching people formulas. So the recipe poem, you're going to laugh. You've heard the recipe poem, right?
Yeah.
I take 1 cup of laughter and 2 cups of sunshine. I add a dash of darkness and conflict. Bake it at 300 degrees until you have a family.
Right.
Yeah. And that's a real thing, but it was a formula that was taught to help get people creative. The problem was then people thought it was that. So in other words, the list poem. 1, completely unrelated thing. 2, completely unrelated thing. 3, completely unrelated thing. 4, I'm going to tell you a story for 30 seconds, and then I'm going to say 5 to remind you I'm still doing a list poem.
Yeah.
It's fucking ridiculous.
Yeah.
and then it got to be now when I listen to poets, I listen for formula lines. So there were a bunch of workshops that were taught. One of them was, "This is the real story." So you'll hear a poet start telling a poem, and about a third of the way through, they'll stop and be like, "But the real story I'm trying to tell here is about blah, 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 blah." And then I'll go through and, "But the real story I'm trying to say here is about," and it's supposed to be this kind of way to kind of turn the poem. But the problem is that you really should take that line out, because it is a signifier that you're using cliche formula.
The other one was like a shotgun, like something to do with a shotgun. Everyone had a shotgun for a while, you know. It was like grip like a shotgun, or a line like a shotgun. Yeah, a shotgun was big for a minute. Like everyone had a shotgun. Remember that?
But it's also like, if you think about musicians, how many songs are written in C major?
Mm-hmm. No, that's true. It's true.
You know, like a ridiculous amount, and they will continue to be written in C major until the end of time. Why? It's just a really popular fucking chord. It's a good chord. You know, it's a good key.
Yeah.
And so in this, it's like there are going to be some of these things that we're going to, like certain words, home, rib cage, shotgun. You know, it's like it's because of how the word feels. You being, because you speak multiple languages, and so you know that there is a different feel that Spanish has in your mouth than English. You know, people who speak Mandarin Chinese, you know, like they come over here and they have certain syllables there that they don't have here. And you listen to like Asian hip hop, that should go so hard. Like,
yeah.
Because from my American ears, all of their words sound so similar that, like, the way they're able to twist the language in hip hop, the fluidity of the language is beautiful and breathtaking. It's what I love witnessing. And I feel that a lot of us, when we're writing poetry, it's not just what we're saying, but specifically how it is being said that defines it as poetry.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah.
I know, I absolutely agree with that. I mean, but I think that you know, like I definitely know I have a formula, but think about it. I mean, like I know it's kind of talking shit, right? People can do what they want to do, but like I very much feel like my formula is my formula, though. You know what I mean? Like, you know, it's going to start this way. It's going to escalate. By the end, I'm yelling, listing off a bunch of historical things that happened. Right? But then all these things that are relatively connected that I've set up some type of precedence for, and that's where. But that's what I do, right? But I mean, it's just when people like follow trends of like, but I'm not. But there's at no point in time like, oh, shotguns are hot right now. I'm now gonna put shotgun in everything I say. Oh, rib cage is hot right now. I'm gonna put rib cage in everything I say. Here's me like trying to be like Buddy Wakefield or something. Or here's me trying to be like you know, Rudy Francisco. Here's me trying to be like, you know what I mean? Like here's me trying to be like Andre Gibson or something. Here's me trying to be like I don't know. I don't even know who's hot right now. But like here's me trying to be like them. Right?
Yeah.
I don't. You know, I don't think that's it's not a good path to a career, is what I want to say.
Yeah.
It's not a good path to a career. That's what I want to say. You might win slams. You might beat my ass in a slam, being like a knockoff like Rudy Francis, but I don't really slam that much. I mean, that's not a way to get booked to colleges. It's not a way to like get a publishing deal. That's not being a knockoff somebody else is not smart.
Well, and you know, so I just released a new book. Let me say, just last year. I'm still going back and editing it. I mean, it's you know how life is. But in that book, one of the things I really had very specific, different collections of poetry that were all put together, because there was getting to be a signature Seth Walker style.
Yeah.
To where you could, and Billy Tuggle was actually the one that brought this up to me. He was like, yo, man, we went to Cupsy and there was this little girl on stage, and I was like, well, look at that. It's a little female Seth Walker. And he goes, man, but your mannerisms, your facial features, your inflections, your tonality, your writing style, everything. But it was her poem. It was her original poem, but it sounded like you wrote it, taught it to her, choreographed it, but it was like she just copied your style so hard. And in my head, I couldn't I'm like, what would a little kid who sounds like me even sound like? Like, because in my head, you know, I kind of know what I sound like, but I'm like, I think of myself as more expansive and not locked in. And then I heard a kid that sounded just like me, and I was like, oh yeah, that kid is a dead ringer for me. That is exactly what I sound like. My work is way more consistent than I was willing to admit. And so I started writing shorter, prosaic poems.
Mm-hmm.
Started working on different formatted, more classical formats in poetry and sonnets and, you know, good old fashioned fuck around limericks. And, you know, I think it's really important that if we're going to claim the title of being poets, that we not just be good slam winners. That's two different things. I know a lot of people who can play an instrument that I would not consider a musician because they don't conceive music, they don't create music, they're not artistic, creative, or musical at all, but they can take this thing and make it make noise according to this sheet. Yeah. You know, and I feel like that's where a lot of your slam performers is they're slam performers. They're doing emotionally intense monologues. They're doing forms of stand-up comedy, maybe. But I mean, like, even the stand-up comedian type poets, I would consider more likely poets than the ones who get up there and, like, oh God, there was that guy back in the day that he won iWhips one year. Blew my mind. He was the only person I've ever seen get first place at iWhips and get booed. But there was this guy, and I hear that at this point he's like really done some amazing artistic things and has really come into himself as an artist. And that's really cool. But back in the day, slamming, all he did was rip off other people's poems. So like there was a poem that was it Taylor Molly or was it Reeves that did the deaf kid poem? And yeah, and he never taught deaf kids.
Yeah.
Okay, so this poet copped that idea. Also,
yeah. So wait. So he ripped off a lie
in sign language like sunflower, and my buddy was like, and so I'm behind him and I have to make the sign for sunflower. But the problem is that this is actually a sexually explicit sign that means to finish inside of someone. So he's talking about how he's
that sign. Like, I mean, that's kind of like
no, and it goes further because he also claims that he was teaching the deaf kids how to write haikus and all of the things where he's saying on behalf of the kids, they're haikus. Okay. Yeah. Deaf kids don't understand syllables, bro. Deaf kids can't write haikus. That's like a blind person writing about their favorite color. What the fuck are you talking about?
Right.
It was so steeped in horse shit, and everyone knew it, but the guy still. Song and the dance.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's like and now he is finally, I hear that he has come into actually being a poet. Okay. And the last I heard from friends, they brought him up and I'm like, oh, that old hack. And they're like, no, dude, he's done some stuff. And and that's where one thing that is nice is I do believe that if you claim the title of poet for long enough, I think the ghosts will get you. I think eventually the spirit gets into you, and whether you like it or not, you start having those experiences. I wrote on my new album, one of the lines was like God decided that good writing first came carved across your chest. The silver lining is that nothing lasts and all bad things must end. But on this path to pain and petty shit, I'd rather break than bend. And that's like I understand there is a fast track for some people, and cool. I would rather be an underground rock star than pull a dumb shit. But no one will ever be able to say Seth wasn't real. Seth was, Seth really, he faked the art. Like, no, man, I fucking lived that. I lived,
so earlier,
died for it.
Yeah. So earlier you mentioned some Alvin Lau and the fact that he'll lie, and that's well known. And so like like that's just well
known. A lot
of
poets do though, and that's the problem. The problem,
I don't want to make
out of it. It was becoming more than not, and that was the problem. Is it people just like capitalism? One of the reasons why me and you always connected is like we both understand this. The fundamentals are not sustainable, and that's the problem with poetry slam. Is that when we highlight and exhibit, only the person who gets number one is the person who did good. We're not focused on the good art. We're only focused on who walked away with a trophy. Then people are going to learn how to win the trophy, not learn how to make good art. And that's what happened. Lying is a way to win.
Yeah.
It is. Will always be. Has always been. Will always.
Right. Yeah. And he froze.
Okay, I miss you, bro. I miss you so bad. Dave's out there in the chat logging.
Yeah. Remember,
I don't want to dog on Alvin Lau specifically because Alvin Lau is like he's just the king of taking your cookies.
Right. No, but I understand you making him the point. I do, however, and if he ever comes at me fucking sideways, you're gonna find out what happens when you come at Cedillo that way. So that's just a fucking different fucking level of shit talk that you won't get in slam. I'm a fucking trained Marxist-Leninist. It's a fucking different level of like talking shit than certain people who like to run around talking shit are prepared for.
Yeah, I mean, like as I've gotten older, I've learned a certain appreciation for the devil, and the thing is like Alvin's one of those people like where you love to hate. Like he became the first slam poetry supervillain. Like people love to hate Alvin Lau. And I was just like, but every time I hang out with him, I fucking love Alvin. He's such an asshole. But I'm an asshole. Like, so like I super love Alvin. And that's the thing is like, and another person is Christopher Michael, another great. He makes great art. He's a vet. He has, insane integrity in his community. Like he is an amazing and upstanding man in every regard. Chris Michael also has this poem and stands in the point that the point of slam poetry is to win.
Yeah.
And so like, love him or hate him, me and him, we just always agreed that we have very different perspectives on what the essence of slam poetry is about. And as the years and years went by, I look back and I'm like, I hate that bastard that he was so right. Like, but slam poetry, the point is the points. And I wanted to be lighthearted about it. I wanted to be, have this emotional attachment, but Chris Michaels was 100% right. The point is the point of slam. If you want to make poetry, make poetry. But as soon as you put in a competition, you're trying to win. Yeah. And so I think a lot of us blow smoke up our own asses trying to act like we're doing this really noble thing. When the truth is that we're just trying to find a way to make it in this world like everybody else.
Right. Yeah. No, it sounds a lot like Shihan. Like kind of like, the point is, but the thing about Shihan is that like he's a really like he's very principled. He actually is very principled. It's like you win some, you lose some, and you don't start making fucking excuses, and you don't start like looking at like you just accept it, and that's it. Like and you try to win, but you don't pretend like you're not trying to win either. Like it's just honest. So I really appreciate people who are honest about whatever they do, whatever they do. So I want to talk about your albums though. Tell us about, but you put out a series of albums. Now you have a book coming out. You have a manuscript for a book. So I want to talk about that too. But first, tell us about your albums that are already out.
So, yeah, I've been putting albums out for a decade. The most recent one. So I'm getting married in July.
Oh, congratulations
on it. Yeah. And when I first met my wife, I met her out here in Colorado when I was living in Austin at the time, and we met at a workshop that I was teaching, and putting them on there back and forth. And so now we have 160 pages of like a year and a half, like all of our correspondences in poetry going back and forth. And it's just absolutely beautiful. And so in that big spurt of creativity, I also started making a lot of music. And a lot of people don't know this, but because I don't play these instruments very well, but I play them enough to be able to play them in a studio to record a track. I can play guitar, harmonica, I can play percussions, I can play piano. I can do a lot of different, different things very mildly. I rip the shit out of harmonica, but everything else, I can get a track out. So I made an album that is Songs to the Moon's Lover. That's a joke between me and my wife. And it has a lot of different, just the first track is a poem, and pretty much everything after that is music. So it's really the first music project I've done. I just released another music video called July 16th. So if people YouTube Seth Walker Poetry, July 16th, it's a black and white video of me wearing a tuxedo and a gas mask, and it's absolutely phenomenal. Probably the coolest video project I've been a part of. So yeah, I mean, before that, most of the albums were. I had a live album that was recorded in Flagstaff, Arizona. I had several albums that were really put together in like Pink Floyd style, where it very much is an album, tells a story, has a lot of weird shit in the middle that made sense when I was younger and on more drugs. Now I've been trying to make more palatable music. My last album is like, you can listen to it without being ripped out of it. Because everything before, like a poetry album, like I would tell people like, yeah, take this and just get like so high this makes sense. And now I'm like, here, listen to my album. It's catchy. You'll end up singing it to yourself in the shower later. Yeah. That's kind of where it's gone. And the poetry book I finally released. I got a copy of it over here somewhere. There it is. When you spend a decade of your life putting together poetry, you get really sick of it, but at the same time, like, you need to honor it. So what I did was I took broken down into 5-6 collections. And so there's, in the beginning, it's kind of slam poems, and then it gets into the Mountain series, which was, a very different style, very consistent to itself, extremely different than anything else. My grandmother was passing away. I took care of her and helped her while she died. And so every day, to try to process the trauma and everything that's going on, so I didn't really end up with a lot of emotional baggage, I wrote poetry every day.
Yeah.
Never expected to publish it or anything like that. So most of the shit that's in there is unedited. So if you go and people get the book and they read Processing Death, and they're like, this is horribly edited. Be like, yeah, it's because I wrote it while I was taking care of my dying grandmother, and I have not gone back and edited it, because I still to this day can't get through most of those poems without hysterically bawling. I just am not emotionally removed enough from the project to go through and edit it. And I don't trust someone else to edit the story of me taking care of my dying grandmother. I will do it before I die, and it will be perfected then. But until then, it just exists in this space. But it is all there. I stand. But I know that there are a lot of people that want to hear that poem. And so now it's in a book. Go fucking read it. You know, this is one of the strangest experiences I've had is trying to explain this to people. Have you ever been at a party and people are having awesome conversation? They're like, hey, Seth, you remember that story you have about someone committing suicide? You should totally tell that to us right now.
Yeah. That's really, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Or like people who have poems about having traumatic events and healing from them. It's like, yeah, that is a very powerful poem. That is a very powerful artistic thing to appreciate on the stage. But no, when I'm sitting down at the after party trying to relax and decompress and enjoy, no, I don't want to talk. And so there's a lot of this where it's like, people say, oh man, I missed that poem. Cool, go get the book.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Not gonna read that poem. Not gonna do it. You know. That's where I laughed. The last time I did that tree poem, I laughed with my wife about it. I had gone to the Denver Mercury and I was like, I need to get one. Always get a feature booked here, so I need to remind them of my work.
Yeah.
So I go in there and I'm like, I have to win first place here tonight because I'm here to prove a point.
Yeah.
This fucking kid. I don't know. Have you ever heard of Johnny Osai?
No. Tell me.
So Johnny Osai, the irony of this is that back in the day when I was slamming for iWhips and I won the title at Nuba, Johnny Osai was in the crowd and he sees me and he has been watching these slam poets and he's like, you know what? Fuck this shit. I'm doing this now. So years later, I show up in the Mercury Cafe and there's this guy who is just like, you know how it is, like there's like 12 people and then usually there's like a few people who kind of jump ahead and then most of the people in the back of the pack. Me and Johnny Osai were like 2 or 3 points ahead of everyone by the third round. And I'm like, this motherfucker's making me earn my bread and butter. I'm like, I should be able to walk in and walk out with your number one. Why? Because I did it for a decade. That was how I made my name. I study, I train, and I walk out with your cookie. And like, I had to work. It came down to third round. I had to drop the tree poem just to make sure that I walked out with first place. And we still ended up closing by this much of a margin. And so like I laughed. I'm like, I gotta quit doing slam because like some of those poems, that are like those old like it wins every like or you used to call those the guaranteed 30 poems. Like I used to have no problem going up and just dropping those out. But nowadays I go up on stage after those 3 minutes. It's 3 minutes of my body working itself up into an emotional hysteria. I don't know how I used to do that shit 7 days a week, bro. I cannot imagine how the hell I used to go and like break the fuck down on stage for 15 minutes every single day.
Yeah.
Not enough money in this world to make me do that now. Hell no, man. It takes me so long to get over that shit now.
Yeah. So right now, we got a question from the audience from Dave Romero. Says, you've had periods where you were one of the most dedicated touring poets out there, more focused on community building. Can you speak to advantages and disadvantages of both? So at one point you were a touring poet, another point you were more focused on building community where you're at. So which are the advantages and disadvantages of both to your career, I guess, and to in general, to your life?
I think it's really poor people. And I think that I have been through a lot of places where there's a poet who comes up in a scene and they've never left their town, and they're telling people what things is and isn't. And when I toured, it was a hard reality check. It's really humbling to show up somewhere and get your ass handed to you by a shittier poet.
Yeah.
Because you read the room wrong. You know, like there was a lot of stuff that I learned where I'm like, in my head and in my heart, good art gets you rewarded. But the most talented musicians I met will never be signed.
Yeah.
The most talented poets I ever heard will never be seen or read. They'll never be published. They'll never get famous. But some rich kid's douchebag nephew or niece who writes absolute trash will get a deal with Sony.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really hard for me. Because in my head, if you are good, you will succeed. And in touring around, I am so blessed because the best artists that I saw and Ekabumi was the first like real. I feel like he was like the first person who had like the zen of winning the fucking slam down, and he was the Berkeley slam coach for forever. You know, nowadays like people like Jamie DeWolf, he will tell you that Ekabumi was like he was what made most of the Bay poets the Bay poets that they became. And, you know, like most of these are people who are huge and influential, and no one ever knows who they are. And if I wouldn't have toured, I would have never had the opportunity to learn underneath them, to study from them. So now I'm back in a place where now I'm here and I'm settled, and I'm trying to work more on fostering and building and investing in community. But what I have to give is my experience of touring.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's when I have kids that are here that are like, you know, well, I'm 25 and I grew up here in Boulder, Colorado, and I've never lived anywhere else, and I go and I read poetry in Denver sometimes. No, dude, you don't have a well-balanced perspective. Like, trust me, racism is still very fucking real and still alive. And they couldn't see it because they're in this little ethnocentric bubble. And that happens artistically. So it's really good for communities that have become incestuous and homogenized to have someone who has a lot of traveling experience to be like, you know, I hate to tell you this, but you're wrong. But the only reason I know that you're wrong is because everyone's wrong.
Right.
Like, I know that you're not right because I know that I'm not right, because I know that no one's right, because everyone I talk to does it differently and is successful. Everyone who's successful does it differently. So there's not a successful way.
But even within scenes, there's like this kind of like venue hypnosis where people like think that they're doing a really big thing in one place, and they think that, and maybe it does mean, and I shouldn't say it doesn't mean anything, because it does mean something. It means a lot, but it means a lot to your life, and it means a lot to the people that will interact with you. So I don't mean it means nothing, but it doesn't quite mean what you think it means. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It doesn't quite mean what you think. What not you, but I mean what the person with what I would describe as venue hypnosis has. It doesn't quite mean what you think it means. This is not the world state. This is not the world. This is not the totality of everything. I mean, this is a big deal to a lot of people, and they're going to hold it dear in their hearts, and they're going to remember that one night forever. And that's a beautiful thing. It's community, but it's not the world. You know?
Well, like in 2010, I slammed for the Austin Slam team. Originally, I had gone back to Houston and I was trying to slam for the Houston VIP slam team. But the problem was there was this one slam that I was in, and I was like, I see what's happening here. I dropped Love Poetry was doing really well. It's a twist of the story of Adam and Eve. It's really beautiful. It's fun. And so I dropped that poem, and the crowd goes mild. I get like a 24 or a 25, and I'm just like, that poem gets a 27 or above. It gets 9 point somethings, and so it was getting like sevens, and I was like, what the fuck? And the person who comes up after me does this poem, and the entire premise of the poem is. He says he's talking to a female, and he's saying, he's going to buy you this. I'm going to buy you this bigger thing. And so he says, he's going to buy you a new used car, but I'm going to buy you a brand new Beamer that's going to take you real far.
Yeah.
He's going to buy you a new TV, but I'm going to get you a widescreen Platinum HD. And he gets a fucking 30. And so I moved. So I moved. So I went home. I packed up my shit. I moved to Austin. I lived out of my truck. There were 2 slams I was not allowed to participate in. One of them was all African Americans. And so being white, I couldn't sign up for the Black History Month slam. And then the women's slam, I couldn't sign up for that. Those were the only 2 slams in the 2010 slam season that happened in Austin that I did not take first place in. And so that's what I tell people is that you can take the same material and move it to a different place and it'll work. But you also have to have a certain level of integrity. Because the thing is, bro, I could have won those slams in Houston, but I don't want to write that shit. I don't want to write 10 poems about how my pen is hotter than your pen, about how my poem is so fire at this. Like, I don't want to write hype poetry. Yes, it will win poetry slams, is specifically in Houston, in Dallas, the Poetry Lounge in LA off of Fairfax, right? I saw a dude do a poem there where he ad-libbed the whole thing, and he kept coming back to a hook of, and if you like it, then you should have put your penis in her. And if you like it, then you should have put your penis in her. And if you liked it, then you should have put your penis in her. And he like literally did the repetition and the. So out of his 3 minutes on stage, probably more than half of it was if you like it, then you should have put your penis in it, and then the hook. And the rest of it was ABCB format that he was ad-libbing. And he sounded like a fucking stoned middle schooler trying to impress a kid on the playground that he read Dr. Seuss recently. Like, it was bad. And he won. And he won because it was the right audience at the right moment.
Yeah.
That's what sucks about slam. Art is art, but slam is competition. And it's a different game.
Yeah.
You know? That's what I think you asked, like, when one night and not work the next. And if you believe in a poem, you can really test it out. The problem here is that I don't know if my poetry is any good or not. I don't know if it's any good anymore. Why? Because the only people that I really have are here in this community, but that's one nice thing is, like, the Corona thing. you know, an upside to it is that now there are all these mics, open mics that are going virtually. So I was able to compete in the first slam that I've competed in fucking year and a half. I've submitted some videos to the first digital slam that Denver did, took second place. For the past 3 weeks, I've been joining the Google meetup, and it's Slam Free or Die in Manchester, New Hampshire, which was one of my favorite scenes in the country. I love the Slam Free or Die kids. So it's like in this era, it's like, you know, like right now. I mean, you know, there's this huge networking community of poets and stuff out there, that as we move more into a digital age and a digital space, I think that we're actually going to see less homogenization, because you're not going to be able to get venue deaf and venue blind, like you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're gonna drop the links below. Tell us where we can find your albums and your book.
So if on Amazon, Amazon.com is where you can find my book. It's called Waiting for the World to Wake Up. Also, I wrote a play called Henry and the Devil that is it's fucking different.
Yeah. Oh, you froze.
Accessible and the least expensive. They are accessible in some other places on some other sites from back when I used to actually make physical copies. But I think the digital is the way to go at this point. You know, less waste on the earth. Does that answer that?
Yeah.
YouTube. My shit's on YouTube. I recently released 3 music videos, and I've been blessed to work with an adult. His name is Chris Patton. He's an adult. He has severe autism, but he is a phenomenal poet. He's nonverbal. So I've been learning how to do assisted typing, and I kind of help him support his wrist. And he types poetry, and we've been writing poetry together. So there's 2 videos out there right now by Chris Patton that are written by him, and they're videos of, you know, shot around his house and stuff like that. But it's me actually reading the poetry. And that's probably the coolest thing I've done with poetry in my entire life, is helping him write a book of poetry. It's just the coolest shit ever.
Yeah. That's dope. All right, cool, man. We'll drop the links below. I thank you so much for your time. I've been doing these back to back, so I can't get on the next one. But Seth, it's been really great reconnecting to you, and I hope we get the chance to talk soon.
Yeah, man. Thank you again for the honor and pleasure to be on here. It's so good to see you, bro. And when we're not doing a show, we should just sit down and vid chat and just talk shit.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the whole idea was to highlight your career, but we ended up, like, I think probably a third of this was just talking shit.
Hey, you know, honestly, that's talking shit is about the realest you can talk these days.
Yeah. All right, good to see you, Seth.
All right, we'll catch you, brother.